What is the funniest lie to tell kids? My kids were getting the vaccinations and the whole trip there I told them that getting shots in the eyeballs was the most effective way. They were terrified. When we got to the doctor's office and the nurse came in with the needles, I said, "Isn't it true that getting your shots in the eyeball the most effective way to prevent future illnesses?" She said she heard about a study they were conducting and didn't know the results. She then looked at my kids and asked if she could give them their shots in their arms instead. You never saw kids so happy and excited to roll up their sleeves in your life. All smiles and no tears. That the toy monster steals their toys at night. Specifically the ones that aren't put away. When I was little, I built a Lego remote control for the TV. My dad was like, "Hey, see if it will change the channel." I kept hitting it, nothing. All of a sudden, a few channels change, and I'm screaming and jumping up and down. Then it stopped working. My dad goes, "That was magic. Awesome Lego remote. Thanks, Dad." My baby sister was 4 when I was 20. One day it was storming very hard, very loud lightning. Sister was terrified, but eventually fell asleep. While she was napping I had to run out into the rain for a bit and was absolutely soaked. Maybe 10 minutes later it stopped raining and my sister woke up and saw me and asked why I was so wet. I said, "Well, since you were so scared, I went and fought the storm. I won," and pointed outside. She ran to look, saw it was clearing up, and the utter awe in her face when she looked back at me. I was her hero for a day. My sister told me that yellow leaves tasted like bananas and brown tasted like chocolate. I apparently went and ate leaves, but came back and told her they don't taste how she said they would. She told me I must have eaten a bad batch. So I continued to try find and eat these tasty leaves. When my daughter was 4, she decided she really wanted a horse. I told her that, since horses eat money and I don't earn all that much, we simply couldn't get one. She believed that horses actually ate money until she was 14. Then she called me an asshole. In my defense, I have a cousin who has horses, and given how much she spends on them, I'm convinced to this day that they do actually eat money. Unplugs the joystick, you control the badge eyes. As a child, my parents told me if I did something bad I was going to baby jail. I believed in baby jail until I was like 12 years old. If I started crying in a public place my dad would say, "Mary, stop that. You don't want to go to baby jail, do you?" And then I would just scream louder, like I don't want to go to baby jail. I was kind of a well-behaved kid until I realized baby jail wasn't real. Then I turned into a teenager and they told me that juvenile detention was a thing and I didn't believe them. Edit, I never went to juvie. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. My little sister used to get upset when I wouldn't take her to PG-13 movies. I told her they were called PG-13 because only 13 people could see them at a time, and we were too late because the 13 people had already gone in. When me and my brothers were kids and complained about something, my dad would go to the phone and say, "Hello, complaint department," and describe our grievance. He said the complaint department for everybody was in Calgary and was run by someone called Chief Alakanoke, and he was getting tired of our complaints. I believed that for the longest time. When we were in the car and it was raining, my mom would wait for a bridge or tunnel, and as we approached it, she would tell us she was going to make the rain stop in 3, 2, 1. She told us she could only make the rain stop for a minute because it made her so tired. My siblings and I were convinced she was magic. They have 11 fingers. Have them count the fingers on one hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the other hand count backwards from 10 on each finger. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. What is 5 plus 6? Watch them stare at their hands. I read about a father who told his daughter she was half human half mermaid, but she had the top half of mermaid and bottom half of a human. Maybe not the funniest, but it's sure cute that they get to believe they are half mermaid. That if they don't eat their vegetables they won't be able to poop and they'll explode. I was at my friend's and his 4 to 5-year-old nephew was over and he stole my friend's phone. So me thinking it would be funny go, hey Brian, I'm gonna have to call the invisible cops on my invisible phone. So he starts laughing saying no you won't. And I pretend to hold my invisible phone up to my ear and go hello, invisible cops? Yeah Brian is stealing his uncle's phone. Oh you'll be here in 5 minutes to take him to invisible jail? Okay I'll keep him here. Immediately he starts freaking out crying. I was on a flight where a kid saw the button for calling a flight attendant, didn't know what it was, but clearly was thinking about pressing it, and so asked his dad what it did. His dad said it opens a trapdoor under your seat and drops you out of the bottom of the plane. Afterwards, the kid spent the whole flight intrigued by the button, thinking about and talking about pushing it, but too worried to actually do it. My sister was about 8 and was asking my dad about buttons in the car while mom and I were in the store. She asked him what the seat warmer button did, and since it had a picture of wave lines above a chair, dad told her it was the ejector button and would launch her chair out of the car. She acted like she didn't believe him, but kept asking about it until mom and I got back in the car. She immediately went for a second opinion. Mom, what's that button do? What, this one? Presses it. No, dad still tells that story 15 years later and can barely get through it without wheezing. My sister is less amused. I forget how it started, but my husband, boyfriend at the time, was trying to convince his 4-year-old brother that his feet were going to fall off. The lie got more and more elaborate, like explaining how he'd have to learn how to walk around on his ankles until his adult feet came in, etc. He was skeptical, even when I agreed that it was true that everyone loses their baby feet before their adult feet grew in. At the time their house was being upgraded from dial-up internet to DSL, and the phone tech was wandering in and out. He happened to come in towards the end and said, "Oh yeah, I remember when I lost my baby feet. Took a year for my new ones to come in." Little brother's face fell immediately, because it must be true if the stranger was corroborating. He ran out of the room to tell his mom, yelling, "But I like my feet," and we all laughed. Even his mom, when she found out. He's an adult now, and my husband and I still razz him about it when we see him. Edit, husband reminded me about the part where he yelled about liking his feet. I told my 7-year-old sister that if you lick your fingers and wipe it off in your ear you will have way better hearing, and when she did it, I talked a little louder and raised the volume on our TV when she wasn't looking. She did this every day till her teacher said that it wasn't true to yell. Doctor convinced my sister to wet willy herself for a week. I used to hold my feet up in the air and tell my sister to smell my socks because I stepped in candy. She fell for it way more times than I expected. Sometimes it would take some convincing as she was a little dubious from previous episodes. I told my daughter that our dog turns into a bat at night and flies around. She was unhappy when she woke up one night and he was still a dog. Now she tells the legend of the bat dog to her brothers. My friend said he was once in the car with his family and they drove past an industrial plant. Smoke was billowing out of a chute, as they do at these plants. He asked his mom what it was, and she told him it was the cloud factory and those were the clouds being released into the sky. He said he honestly thought clouds were man-made for a better portion of his life. So the lie itself isn't all that funny. My parents told me a car couldn't start until everyone's seat belts were buckled. One day my grandmother started her car before I was buckled, and little Red Sox 933 lost his sheet and started screaming how the car was broke. I imagine if I was an adult in the car I would have hard time not laughing. My friend is a little person. One time when we were out a little girl asked her why she was so short. She told the girl that her shoes ate her feet and the bottoms of her legs, and we kept walking. I looked back to see the little girl frozen in fear looking at her feet. That your ears turn purple when you lie. My best friend's mom told her this when we were little, and she covered her ears or took down her ponytail every time she lied until she was 8. When my youngest was in infant school, aged 5 to 7, I could see his playground from our living room window, and when he came home from school I used to say things like, "Did you have a good game of football after lunch today?" Or, "I saw you playing tag with Steven." He used to be amazed, and I just used to say mums know everything. This lasted for a couple of years and now it's a family joke, but it's changed to Nana knows everything. My father, may he rest in peace, had 3 toes amputated. When in public pools with kids around he would stick his foot out of the water and tell them a pool shark got him. You've never seen little kids literally run on water to get out of the pool. When I was growing up I was at the bus stop and a neighbor girl was playing with an empty bottle. Her mom told her to put it down because people peed in them. Edit. Also one time my dad told me white chocolate was soap while I was eating it and I puked a little. I was about 5 and my aunt was always really into taking me places, but wasn't the best as far as morals go. One time, we went to the movies. I can't remember what movie it was, I think it was Lion King or Tarzan, but she told me all the yellow popcorn kernels, the good and buttery ones, would make me break out in blisters, and to give them to her. Same aunt told me that, if I stepped on one of those prickly balls that fall on the ground, I would turn into a tree, and they'd mark me with an X. Of course I stepped on one, and cried all the way home, where my older sister laughed at me until my mom got home hours later. Still get made fun of for that one almost 20 years later. Same aunt took me to the movies again and told the people I was 2, so I'd get in free. I was like, no I'm not, I'm 5, and she slapped me on the hand and didn't give me any snacks because she ended up having to pay. I convinced my kids I was a GD. I waved my right hand to turn up the volume on my car while secretly using my left hand to turn up the volume with the steering wheel controls. I did the same thing with the electronic controls for my seat. When they challenged me to do something else, I replied that I had already done too much, because a GD should never use the force for trivial things. If you put a piece of ham in a DVD player, it will show you a short film about pigs. Also, that Uncle Jeremy's vodka drinks are like juice boxes for adults, but deadly to children. Jeremy, being a harmless soul who hits the sauce a little hard when he's not busting his ass as a lawyer, showed them the most fun afternoon of their lives, a non-stop cavalcade of games, candy, soda, and more games, all in the sunshine, surrounded by their family, by a lakeside. I work in a giant dome theater in a museum, so we see a lot of kids. For a while, we had a movie called Great White Shark. Whenever a kid asked if it was scary, I'd say no. The movie isn't scary. Now, when we fill the theater up with water and release the live sharks, that's scary. That the human body is only allotted so many words a year, and if you talk too much now, you might not be able to talk for the rest of the year. I told my kid that the oil spots on the road were actually spots left from children who ran across the road without looking and got ran over by a car. He looks both ways twice before crossing the street still. Fun story, my brother-in-law was in a car accident recently that ripped his left leg off and he got ejected. This was a few weeks ago and the grease spot from him laying in the road bleeding out is still there. So, more truth to it than you'd think. My uncle told me to pound my knee with my fist while taking a poop to make it go faster. Didn't realize until I was 18 that it was to make it sound like I was fapping. I told my oldest, he was 6 years old at the time, that if he didn't behave himself at the store, I would make him 5 years old again. And on his next birthday, he'd be 7. Totally skip being a 6 years old again. He loved being 6 for some reason, and the thought of missing any part of it was not what he wanted to face. He settled his butt down right then and there. I'm sure he didn't totally believe I could make him 5 again, but why chance it? I convinced my younger brother and my 2 nieces that I invented the moon. I lived away for 10 years, and I told them that I had been living there on the moon in order to keep it working. They're older now, but they still remind me of this every so often and tell me how they convinced some of their friends of the same thing. My wife's parents convinced her that horses were cows and cows were horses. Every time they'd pass by driving, they used the wrong one. She argued with her kindergarten teacher furiously that her parents taught her well and that the teacher was wrong. Took a concerned teacher call to my in-laws and some ice cream to change her mind.